Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. A common complaint with many Euro games is the points salad. That moment where you tot up scores from half a dozen objectives and different grading criteria, double check your multipliers and penalties, and count your victory tokens. I have to admit I'm not a fan myself, and I've always felt points salad is a bit of a misnomer really. They aren't fresh, vibrant and tasty, they are stodgy and a bit of a struggle to get through. They can cause bloating for what would otherwise be a light and enjoyable 30-minute filler, and if players aren't fully aware of all the scoring conditions, an unexpected final points tally can leave the loser with a bad taste in their mouth. For me, adding up points after an enjoyable game is less like a salad and more like that moment when you're dining with friends. You've enjoyed the meal, but then someone decides to split the bill based on what everybody ordered. It's 10 minutes of, well, I only had the chicken, and, but you had 2 glasses of wine. Nobody enjoys that. And sidestepping the dangers of the point salad isn't easy. To serve up an interesting game with multiple paths to victory and engaging decisions on every turn, a game has to be clever, and that frequently requires the range of scoring options that leads to the point salad. Which brings me to the subject of this video, Lunar Capital, which was sent for review by the online card and board game retailer Magic Madhouse, whose link you can find in the video description. Lunar Capital is very clever. It's one of those wonderful Euro games that combines an interesting theme, cute graphics, a streamlined rule set, and lots of ways, and I mean lots of ways, to score points. The point salad was inevitable, but the big question is the game fun enough to offset the maths? Does the main course make it as easy as possible to stomach the salad? Short answer? Yeah, I think so. From the outset, Lunar Capital lures you in with its wonderful theme and art. The game is based in 1977 when big companies are investing in construction on the moon. Their aim is creating the most efficient settlement possible, which will become the moon's capital city. As one of these companies, you have to acquire blueprints and project options, assembling them in your play area to maximize your score. It's a neat theme, made all the better by the excellent artwork. The game is based in the 70s, and while the art has a modern style, it strongly evokes that optimistic and slightly naive Tomorrowland way that people of the 50s imagined the future would be. To add even more visual punch, the game also includes some nice 3D cardstock elements, a first player tower, a rocket ship to load your project options into, a card dock, and even an organizer for inside the box. Non-essential elements that give the game additional table presence and add to that desire to jump into a game once it's set up. I'd be lying if I said the theme and art weren't a big part of what made me want to try this game in the first place, but great space-themed art alone doesn't make for a stellar game. Fortunately, the game backs up its looks with a really solid, smooth, relatively quick strategy game for 2 to 4 players. It even throws in an official solo play mode, which lacks a lot of the bite of the full gaming experience, but still offers a stiff challenge and is a great way to learn the rules. The game is actually really very easy to learn and understand, it just doesn't appear that way. There are so many ways to score points, there's a real chance of scaring off new players as you rattle through all the scoring conditions before your first game. It's probably better to just let people jump in, explain scoring conditions as you go, remind them of their options on their turn, and learn through playing. And the game is so streamlined, I think most players will have a firm grasp of the rules after a turn or 2. In simple terms, the game plays out over 3 phases, and there are 4 rounds in each phase. At the start of the game, each player selects one of the 4 available sponsors, which come with cute little wooden tokens, and each gets a hand of 3 construction cards. You then create a display of 4 construction cards and attach 1 project token to each of those cards. In each round, the players in turn will take 1 of 4 cards from the display and any project tokens attached to that card. They will then place 1 card on their settlement, which may not be the card they just claimed, along with all of the project tokens they just claimed. They then refresh the display for the next player. And that's it. This continues through 12 rounds over 3 phases, with a new stack of project tiles being introduced at the beginning of each phase. And then you score your points. It's that simple. But while on face value you are only making a few simple choices, there's much more to it than it first appears. There are actually dozens of considerations with the selections you make and how you choose to play your cards and tokens. First of all, you need to understand that the cards become the foundations of your settlement. Each card is divided into 3 or 4 spaces, and you can place 1 project token on each space. But some cards have meteorites, scaffolding, or existing projects on them. Existing projects act like project tokens, so it can be a good way to get a quick head start in assembling your settlement. You can't build on meteorites, although the raw materials they provide may score points at the end of the game, while scaffolding prevents the construction of anything except habitat constructs, so the presence of scaffolding can limit your options. However, it is possible to acquire demolition tokens that allow you to bulldoze scaffolding or meteorites. So when you select your card, you have to think about what is on the card and how many buildable spaces it gives you. Larger spaces can be advantageous under certain circumstances, but also limit the number of spaces you have to work with in the first place. And that's not all. The next thing to consider is where you want to place the card in your settlement. Your settlement can be a maximum of 3 rows deep and any number of columns long, but each card has a number in the top left, and whenever you add a card to a row, it has to be a higher number than the previous card in that particular row. Sure, you may grab a really good card with a good option on it, but if it's got a 10 in the corner, you don't want to drop it into your settlement too early, or you will be at a big disadvantage later on. Fortunately, some project tokens give you selenite robots. When you place a card, if you have one of these selenite robots, you can place it over the card's number, and it becomes numberless. This means you no longer have to worry about what number was on the previous card. Problem solved. But that's not all. You also have to worry about what the card you take might cost you. The most recent card added to the display always gets a special latest delivery token on it. If you decide you want to take the card with the token on it, you have to pay for it with one of the cards from your hand. That means you will have one less card from now on. Take the last delivery card too often and you will be severely limited in your options. And of course, the cards in your hand at the end of the game are worth some points as well. But that's not all. Every time you take a card, you take its project tokens too. The number of tokens ranges from 1 to 4, depending on which round of the current phase you are in. So as the turns progress, each card selection you make gives you even more options. And now the real thinking begins, because you have to figure out where you want to place all these projects, and every type of project token has its own way of scoring points. There are 3 different types of vital systems controlling hydrogen, oxygen and water. When you place these in your settlement, you want to create orthogonally connected groups, because at the end of the game you will score points based on your largest group of each of the 3 types. There are 4 different types of greenhouses: pears, apples, lemons and wild. You want to place greenhouses so they are connected orthogonally, because your largest group of greenhouses will score points, but also each complete set of greenhouses, that's 1 pear, 1 apple and 1 lemon, will also score points. Of course, the wild greenhouses can be used to represent any kind of greenhouse, making it easier to complete sets. Then you have the habitat constructions. There are 5 types of habitation modules, and they score points at the end of the game for each orthogonally or diagonally adjacent structure of the type depicted on the token. For example, if you have a habitation module with a greenhouse icon, you will score points for each greenhouse adjacent to that token. Normally, such habitation modules can only score a maximum of 8 tokens, but if you place one on a large space on a construction card, you can squeeze in 2 more structures for a total of 10. You also have residential complexes. They don't have to be adjacent to anything, but at the end of the game they will score you points based on either the number of sales offices or the number of habitation modules that you have in your settlement. There are moon landing ground tokens that don't grant points, but they do grant you an extra card in your hand. There are sales offices that score 2 victory points each, but also work as multipliers for scoring some residential complexes. There are demolition tiles that don't score points, but allow you to destroy any project in your settlement, either a token or something printed on a card. There are meteorite tokens. They aren't very helpful, but the player with the most in their settlement will get extra victory points at the end of the game. Finally, there are logistics redistribution tokens, which don't score victory points, but allow you to swap the position of any 2 projects in your settlement. But that's not all. Some of these projects have the selenite robot symbol on them, granting you those all-important robots that blank out the numbers on construction cards. So you can see, even though your choices boil down to selecting a card and then placing the associated tokens on your settlement, there are a lot of different elements to consider in every selection and placement. And of course, it's not just about what you're doing. While it is possible for this game to feel a little bit like multiplayer solitaire as you furrow your brow and try to figure out what's best for your own settlement, it pays to keep an eye on your opponents too. Sure, you may want to grab that extra greenhouse token, but if your opponent is about to score big points by scooping up a habitation module on a different card, maybe you should take that one instead. And you have to keep in mind the race for sponsored concessions too. Oh, didn't I mention that? You see, While you do have the option to grow your settlement organically, playing with short-term tactics to maximise your options each turn, there are some fixed goals put in place at the start of the game that will help you to crystallise your longer-term strategies. There are 3 concession cards at the top of the board, representing additional ways to score victory points. These vary from making sure you don't have any scaffolding in your settlement at the end of a phase, to making sure you have built a certain number of projects in a particular configuration. And here's the kicker, you only check to see who scores those concessions at the end of each of the 3 phases, and once someone has scored a concession, nobody else can score it again for the rest of the game. This is where the heart of the game's competition lies, the race to be the first to claim those concessions. If 2 or more players reach the conditions at the same time, they all score the points and they get to place their cute little wooden tokens on the card. But then that card is off limits to everyone else, and that adds another layer of decision making to everything you do. Sometimes you have to give up a card you really wanted because another card would allow your opponent to score the concession before you. Sometimes you have to make a suboptimal move to claim those bonus points for yourself. But that's not all. Oh no, actually that is all. But that's more than enough. If your head is spinning, just listening to me listing off these different scoring options and decision points, you should have some idea of how difficult it can be to introduce this game to a new player, and why I suggest learning by doing. Once players are at the table, it all clicks incredibly quickly, but you really need to see the flow of the game in action to make sense of it. It really is a surprising game with so much going on under the hood. Every single action must be taken with care, every point matters. And you can't always adopt the same strategies in each game. There is plenty of replayability built in because you only see a limited number of construction cards in any given game, and will only use 3 of a large stack of concessions. Even the number and type of project tokens available will vary based on the number of players. Every game, while asking of you the same thing, pick a card, place tokens, will throw up its own unique challenges for you to overcome. And as I mentioned, there's even a solo mode. It basically involves trying to create the best settlement possible while playing against an automated opponent who is automatically assumed to have scored the most points possible with the cards and tokens they collect. It's incredibly tough to beat. No, I've never beaten it. And that means it's not only a good way to learn the game, but also a good way to hone your skills. It's not as fun as playing against other people, but it's a fine way to spend half an hour. Until you get to the point salad. Yeah, we're back to that again. As you can imagine, considering what I've talked about so far, the point salad is, well, it's not a side dish. It's another whole meal. It can take quite a while to work through each of the different types of projects, working out your largest groups, calculating your multipliers, and comparing where necessary against the scores of your opponents. It's not a lot of fun, but on the plus side, at least the publishers saw fit to include a scoring pad, which does make the whole process a little easier. I don't think adding up the points is going to be a problem for everyone, and as I mentioned earlier, I do think the fun choices the game provides do offset any aggravation, but there's no getting away from the fact this game gives you points on your points, drizzled with points, and with extra points as garnish. It may be too much for some people to digest. For me, Lunar Capital is a fun little game, but it's not my favourite game of this sort. Being totally honest, I think when it comes to a tile laying game where you are trying to create patterns and score groups, I would rather play Overbooked from Jumbo, which I have reviewed previously. I don't like the theme as much, but I think it's just that little bit more fluid, easier to grasp and easier to score, which means once you're done with the game, you're just a little bit more excited to reset the board and play again. I have both games in my collection now, and I am intending to hold on to both. Considering the cluttered and overstuffed state of my shelves, that says a lot, I suppose. But I think that's it, other than to say thank you once again to Magic Madhouse for providing this game for review. Magic Madhouse has an incredible selection of games, so even if you aren't interested in Lunar Capital, I do suggest hopping over to their website to check out what they have. There's an affiliate link in the video description below. Of course, if you use that, you will be helping out the channel. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.